Was the Deshaun Watson trade the worst in NFL history? It definitely has a seat at the table. We're going to talk about that on a Thursday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Let's roll.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to a Thursday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Tyler Rowland, local expert for the Locked On Titans podcast, here with Alex Clancy, local expert of the Locked On Cardinals podcast. It's a crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and it is presented by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Make sure that you guys go check out your team's crossover Thursday episode. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Also, make sure that you get subscribed to the Locked On NFL YouTube channel, Locked On NFL podcast feed on whatever app you use, bringing you all of the latest NFL coverage every single weekday. But with that being said, Alex, we do got to dive into today's big story, and we got news that Deshaun Watson will have surgery on his shoulder. He will be out the rest of the season. And it brings into question, through 2 years of the Deshaun Watson experience in Cleveland, is it the worst trade in NFL history? Now, I want to say first and foremost, it's hard to say that right now, but there is the potential with the way that it's shaping up that it could be just that. So, of course, the Browns received Deshaun Watson and a 2024 sixth-round pick. The Texans received 2022 first-round pick, which turned into Kenyon Green, the guard from Texas A&M, who's had some injury issues. But they also got the number 12 pick in last year's draft, which turned into a trade for Will Anderson Jr. They also got fourth-round pick in 2022, running back Dameon Pierce. They got Tank Dell, who has been a surprise star at wide receiver for them, with a Cleveland Browns pick in the third round this year. They still have a first-round pick in this upcoming draft and a fourth-round pick in this upcoming draft, along with the trades that they were able to make with the additional capital that led to other players as well. This has the opportunity to be, again, the worst trade, or the best trade if you're the Texans, in NFL history, because Watson has not played whatsoever. The Browns burned $250 million guaranteed, the most ever, on Watson, and through 2 seasons, they're barely going to get any production, and when he has played, he hasn't really been the player that he was in Houston. So I guess my initial question to you is, do you think that this could be the worst trade in NFL history if things continue to work out for the Texans and things continue to deteriorate for the Browns?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't think it matters what happens with the Texans. It still could be in a vacuum for Cleveland with what's transpired since they acquired him. Now, I will say that what they've done, Jack Easterby, et cetera, over in Houston has really turned the table from the Bill O'Brien era to what they're doing now, bringing in D'Amico Ryans. They've drafted well in the top 4 rounds of the last couple of drafts, as you highlighted. The one saving grace that Cleveland has is he's still under contract and he's still on the team. That's going to be an immovable contract. That's going to be one where, that's it. He's going to be your guy. Now, there's one, because you mentioned the draft, what the draft picks turned into pertaining to players. I think an honorable mention, one that has the mantle at this point above Deshaun Watson, even though the contract is immovable, is the Trey Lance trade made by San Francisco, because that turned into the entire team for and save Tyreek Hill for the Miami Dolphins, and they still got Jalen Waddle 3 picks later, and Trey Lance is no longer with the organization, which means there's no recouping that trade for San Francisco.
Watson could get better, and it could be worth it more down the line. I see what you're saying there.
Right. So that's the only saving grace, but that canceled out with the fact that he got $250 million. Yeah, I mean, I feel bad for Browns fans because this was supposed to be the fix. Kevin Stefanski seems to have everything going against him. This is the best defense that they've had in a long time, maybe the best in the NFL. Nick Chubb goes down, they pivot. Jerome Ford, Kareem Hunt, they have a run game. Deshaun Watson comes back healthy. He looks fine in a couple wins. And then it's like,
Yep.
and it wasn't even a knee or anything like that. It was completely different from his injuries in the past until this year. So it's just like, what in the wide world? It seems like Cleveland's just doomed regardless. But yes.
Yeah, the one thing that I do want to say, though, is I do disagree that the Houston part of it isn't as much of a big factor. I think when you look at worst trades in NFL history, both sides contribute to the perception that makes it that. So I think even though Stroud wasn't used, Stroud was a Houston Texans draft pick, not what they got from the Browns. But the way that they've been able to stack their team around C.J. Stroud, and like the Browns thought they were trading for what C.J. Stroud is doing right now. And you're telling me that the Browns made that trade, gave Watson $250 million, he barely plays, and the guy that they wanted is the guy that Houston ended up with all along. I mean, what a trade for the Texans. They're now 5-4. Stroud is maybe the best story in the NFL right now. So I think that both the sides and how it works out for both sides will matter. And I think it's similar to a recent trade, the Tennessee Titans trading A.J. Brown. Traylon Burks can barely stay on the field. The Titans are clearly on the downswing right now. A.J. Brown is setting records every year in Philadelphia, and they went to the Super Bowl last year. I think what happens with A.J. Brown in Philadelphia contributes to how bad the trade looks. The other trade that I really wanted to bring up here that is right now I think is the worst trade in NFL history by far is the Herschel Walker trade, where they traded with the Minnesota Vikings and that stacked the 1990 Cowboys so that they could win 3 Super Bowls in a row. I think right now, if we're honest and we're historians of the game, that is the worst trade in NFL history. There are others that you could probably go through and look at even earlier in NFL history. But I think that if Stroud wins a Super Bowl for the Texans, their first ever, and Watson never really does much for the Browns, this obviously has the potential to turn into the worst.
On the other side, though, but you're looking at it with the results already determined. Like, we have no idea what the draft picks are going to be when you make the trade. The contract was the egregious part here. And him sitting out a year was the egregious part here. Maybe give him a 1-year, $20 million
knowing he would.
Just to see. This is Cleveland's mistake by giving him all the guaranteed money after not seeing him play for a year and some change. What Houston's done with the actual trade itself is irrelevant because Cleveland has no say in the result of that. They know what draft picks they gave up. The majority of draft picks in the history of the NFL draft are busts. There's a large, especially as you go down past the top 10. It's a crapshoot. And yes, things have worked out. Tank Dell, Dameon Pierce for sure, even though, he's regressed a little bit this year. They had Laramie Tunsil. They've got Cleveland. I agree with you. But Cleveland can't be faulted even more because the Texans utilized those draft picks well. They very well could have not. Cleveland had no say in that. They traded market value for a guy that they wanted, and they're like, this is our guy for the next 5 years.
I get it. And in a perfect world, you would be right. But in this world that we live in, they will be judged by what the Texans did. And with all of those things that they gave up. You know what I mean? That's just
all of this is great for the NFL. Everything. Noah Brown, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, the defense, Jalen Petrie, and who they've drafted the past couple of years. It is potentially the best story. And then one trade that happened, in my home cooking backyard, the Arizona Cardinals and Houston Texans trade was to the hair, perfectly even. Both sides got what they wanted.
Yeah, 100%. That was a great trade. But with that being said, we're going to turn to a great Thursday night football game between the Ravens and the Bengals. Before we dive into our conversation about that, though, do want to let you guys know that a Thursday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast is brought to you by DoorDash. Look, you've counted on DoorDash before, whether it be restaurant food, whether it be groceries now, whether it be retail. DoorDash has you covered. You're always going to get friendly, quick, prompt service. I've never really had any issues with DoorDash, and I'm somebody that uses DoorDash quite often, if I'm honest. And you got a Thursday night football matchup set ahead of you. It's Thursday night. In my opinion, the way I live my life, Thursday is just Friday Junior, and I like to get my weekend started early, as I tell you guys at the end of every show. If you want to get your weekend started early, then take the night off from cooking, order you some wings, some pizza, something, and enjoy a fantastic football game. And when you order it, make sure you order it on DoorDash. Get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter the code LOCKED23. That's LOCKED 23, subject to change. Terms apply. Again, that's 50% off, up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. All you got to do is download the DoorDash app, enter that code LOCK23, subject to change. Terms apply. All right, Alex, we're going to continue a Thursday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. We talked about the Deshaun Watson news with the injuries out for the season, what that might mean for how the trade is perceived. A fun conversation nonetheless. But now we got to get into the real football in Week 11. And boy, do we have a banger on Thursday night between the Bengals and the Ravens, a battle for AFC North supremacy. Probably the best division in football right now, and two teams that have championship expectations. Before we get into it, though, I do want to thank you guys for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. I want to let you guys also know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's called Locked On Sports Today. It's giving you 24/7 coverage of the top sports stories. They're going to have local experts from Locked On, plus national shows like this one covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Be a part of history. Alex, Ravens playing great football. No doubt about it. The Bengals, maybe playing some shaky football. After a loss to the Texans and a ton of injuries, looks like T. Higgins is probably going to be out. I believe Chris Hubbard was ruled out. Trey Hendrickson should be able to play according to recent reports. They could always change. Jamar Chase has been banged up, but I think this is going to be an absolute brawl. I think this is going to be a low-scoring game. I think the Ravens win this game. I think the Ravens are a better football team right now with the state that the Bengals are in, but I think it'll be close no matter what. My question for you is this: who wins this game? But 8 weeks from now, who's the better football team?
Good questions. I'm going to take the latter question first, and I will say the Bengals. I think this is the year where Joe Burrow breaks through. This is the year where Patrick Mahomes not breaks through completely, because it's Patrick Mahomes until it's not. Josh Allen has kind of taken a step back. We'll see if CJ Stroud overtakes the AFC South and they win the division. We have no idea what's going to happen in the AFC South. Mm-hmm. But pertaining to Joe Burrow, he's back. Okay. He's healthy. And now he just needs to utilize Trenton Irwin. He needs to utilize Irv Smith more. He needs to utilize Tyler Boyd much more than he has, even though Tyler Boyd had a couple good games in a row. And then, Jamar Chase is, in my opinion, in a vacuum, still the most special receiver in the NFL. I think that, because in space, he's special, and he's got, years of rapport with Joey B. Now, going into Thursday night, going to tonight, both of these teams are coming off a game where they definitely should have won that they ended up losing. Mm-hmm. Like, in weird fashion, they lost both. They both lost. And this is going to be a massive 2-game swing if the Bengals can win, because that'll move Baltimore to 7-4, and it'll bump up Cincinnati to 6-4. And when you look at the two teams in the middle, now Deshaun Watson's out, and do you really trust Pittsburgh to win more than 8 games when it matters? It's going to be these two. They're going to be vying for that crown. And this game could be won. If Baltimore sews this game away and wins, they pretty much have a ticket to the AFC North crown. But I mean, who's going to win tonight? I can't go against Lamar Jackson and this defense when everybody's healthy. You have Keaton, what's his name? Keaton Williams. Keaton Mitchell, who is going to be seemingly the RB1 that they wanted J.K. Dobbins to be.
He's got juice, man. He's got juice. Yeah. I mean, they're still going to need Gus to be the power guy, but Mitchell definitely has juice. I think he should be playing a lot more than just Justice Hill.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, I think I'm taking Baltimore in the short term, even though it would be a massive win for Cincinnati. But I think Cincinnati is going to be a shoo-in into one of the playoff spots once everybody gets healthy and they can get everything reared up.
I tend to agree with you, but I said this all season. I picked the Ravens to win this division. I think the Ravens are at home tonight. I think they win tonight. But I'm starting to think that the Ravens will be the better football team even later. The Bengals just haven't got their footing this year. And with the injuries, I think it's tough. They've made multiple deep postseason runs in the last 2 years. I think that does take a toll on a team long term. And the Ravens, because of their injuries, haven't had that run. So I think the Ravens can kind of stay fresher, longer. I think Lamar Jackson's just playing at a high level, but I honestly don't see the Ravens as a team that can win the Super Bowl, though. I just don't trust their weapons on offense. I don't know that Lamar Jackson's playground style that seems to win a lot for him. I just don't know if it's sustainable all the way through all the winter months. I think the Bengals have a much more sustainable model, I guess, of playing, but it may just come down to the injuries, but I think that the Bengals lose this game and they drop to 5-5. And that reminds me of another team that dropped to 5-5. And just before we move on to the best games of the week, Alex, Buffalo Bills.
You can say it.
About their impending doom. You specifically, I'll give you more credit than me, but we have been discussing since the offseason, since last offseason.
2 years ago.
Things for Buffalo, they hit their peak. They had their chance, the 13 seconds. They still couldn't knock out Patrick Mahomes, and now things are on the downswing, and they fired Ken Dorsey this week. How long until the Reaper starts to knock on Sean McDermott's door? We've been talking about it, so I just wanted to mention it real quick here before we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, whenever we can point out when we were right, it's
Yes.
let's take 2 segments to do it. I mean, the real question here is, first of all, I said at the end of this season, Stephon Diggs would not be a Buffalo Bill. Trevon Diggs, his brother, cornerback of Dallas Cowboys, went out and said Josh Allen didn't start until Stephon Diggs got there, which by all accounts is pretty much true. Now, with that, Brian Daboll was very Stephon Diggs friendly with the offense. So my question to you is, because, there's obviously something wrong. It turned into that's a great story to, okay, they got there once. Oh, no, 13 seconds, they got Patrick Mahomes. And then now it's like, okay, now the bread is stale. And it's like, okay, now people are like, what the hell is wrong here? There are expectations that haven't been met at all. And when it comes to my question to you is, Brian Daboll having trouble in New York, Ken Dorsey fired. Does Brian Daboll get fired and he goes right back, Josh McDaniels style to Buffalo, keeping Sean McDermott's job, who just got an extension recently, I think. Do you run it back again, or do you fire and hire an offensive-minded head coach, like a coordinator from somewhere else, which is probably what it would be, I would think, at this point?
I mean, for me, I would not get rid of Sean McDermott yet. And I don't think the Giants get rid of Brian Daboll. I don't think they do that yet. 2 seasons after the first year that they had making the playoffs, getting a playoff win, and then coming back in this down year, I just don't think that the Giants would get rid of him. That I think they're going to give him another season. 3 seasons seems fair, with 1 good one, 1 bad one, see how he responds. And 2 out of 3 is the pattern. So I don't think that they'll do that. I think they'll ride Joe Brady. I think Joe Brady and Josh Allen are said to have a good relationship. I think they'll try to do that. But I definitely think the Stephon Diggs thing is something to watch, because Diggs, we have seen, will be cantankerous. He'll make his opinion heard. There was already rumblings before the season of their struggles for his brother to come out, and other people are coming out on social media defending him. I think we could see, the Bills, because look what the Chiefs did. The Chiefs said, hey, we're either going to pay $1 million to Tyreek Hill, or we're going to put this money on the offensive line. And even though Tyreek Hill is gone, the Chiefs continue to be the team that comes out of the AFC despite all the good wide receivers on the Bengals and the Bills. So I think the Bills may look at that and be like, all right, the passing options may not be as good with Stephon Diggs gone, but maybe if we put that money into a better offensive line, it serves us better anyways. I think that's an interesting conversation to have, and that's probably one that the Bills will have throughout the rest of the year and into the offseason.
He'd still garner a first-round pick. I think like a first-round pick straight up for Stephon Diggs, and especially a late one, because you know what? This may be the perfect time for the Chiefs to re-add a star wide receiver right when everything else is set. Somebody who's made his money somewhere else already may want to sign an extension that's team-friendly, and he can come in. Imagine Stephon Diggs in any offense. Him and Keenan Allen are the best route runners in football. You put him with Patrick Mahomes, he'll get all he wants to eat. Kansas City.
I at least want to put Amari Cooper's name in there, but that's a conversation for a different day.
Yeah, fair enough. We do like Amari Cooper on this podcast. Anyways, it is time, Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans, to do our best and most fun segment of the week, best games of Week 11. We'll hit that as we roll on here on Locked On NFL Thursday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. First, this episode of Locked On NFL Thursday is brought to you by Jace Medical. So, we spend a lot of time talking together, us and you. We get fired up together on wins and losses, who starts and who sits. I'm thankful for that connection we have, truly. I mean, the everydayers are what makes this, platform go round. And today I want our chat to be a little bit more personal. I just learned that you can get a 1-year supply of ED medications. You realize what that means. Bring on extended travel, bring on the next natural disaster or supply chain issue, you're covered, my friend. You don't have to worry about whether or not you can refill your generics for Cialis, Viagra, etc. And this is possible because of our friends at Jace Medical. Go online right now at jacemedical.com to receive your 12-month supply on your daily medication. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. A verified customer had this to say about Jace. Quote, "I'm thankful for the service. Supply chain issues caught me to cut pills in half to have them. I ordered most of the daily meds with a year supply. I also ordered antibiotic kit. I feel secure now. Prices are lower than local pharmacies. I highly recommend this for everyone." So if you or someone you love would like to get peace of mind by having a year supply of any daily med, go to jacemedical.com to see if it's offered for you. Remember to use promo code locked on for $20 off your purchase. Tyler, we can't talk this whole segment about the Ravens and Bengals. I know those are your two favorite teams to talk about. We have to give the people more.
Another one out there.
Alex Clancy, Tyler Rowland. Alex Clancy, Locked on Cardinals. Tyler Rowland, Locked on Titans. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. The last segment on Thursdays during the season. Games of the week. Tyler Rowland, take it away.
All right. There's one that stands above all the rest. It is a Super Bowl rematch from last year.
Yeah.
The 8-1 Philadelphia Eagles against the 7-2 Kansas City Chiefs. Alex, who's going to win this game? I think the Eagles are going to win. I think the Eagles are better this year.
What's my saying?
It's Patrick Mahomes until it isn't.
Arrowhead, bright lights. Like, they're going to go as A.J. Brown goes, it seems.
Yeah.
You know, the DeAndre Swift is kind of he's still there, taking a little bit of a step back.
That's a product of the O-line, really.
Yeah, right. And Devontae Smith is getting healthier, but A.J. Brown has been the best receiver, like not named Tyreek Hill this year. What do you think? I mean, so you think Philly goes on the road and beats him in prime time?
I would say that it's Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, CeeDee, the last
wide
couple
receivers
weeks
in the NFL this year. I mean, I think that's the leaders in receiving yards. I think I'm missing like one person, but that's got to be 3 of the top 4. So,
are we ready to have the conversation about Kellen Moore? Maybe not today. Maybe not today because things have unlocked since Kellen Moore left, and it's just interesting. We can talk about that at a later date. Anyways, it's good for CeeDee Lamb because this is the potential everybody had hoped he'd be able to reach coming out of Oklahoma. Cardinals fans wish they would have drafted him instead of Isaiah Simmons a couple of years ago. Anyways, for me, there's a couple. One, home cooking for me, Houston Texans is must-watch football.
Yeah,
must-watch
now,
TV.
yes.
These are Madden on easy numbers that these receivers are putting up. Noah Brown, 7 for 155.
Stone cold Noah Brown.
I mean, Nico Collins, who was hurt, and then you have Tank Dell come in. You have Noah Brown. You've got Dalton Schultz having a resurgence over there, leaving Dallas. Another former Cowboy with Kyler Murray going back home. He wins in the state of Texas. He had the miraculous comeback last week on the 3rd and 10 scramble, like everybody's grown to know and love of Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray playing in Texas is always fun. And seeing the mental anguish that Cardinals fans are going to have to go through, doing the mental math on, should the Cardinals win or lose? Because they have the Texans pick and they have their own pick, and the Texans are winning a whole bunch of games. So you want the Cardinals to win, but then if they win, they'll drop out of the top 5. But if they lose, Houston will be a playoff team. You see my point. It's just one of those back and forth.
You remind me of the vision board meme from Always Sunny in Philadelphia right now.
Yeah.
Like, the Cardinals win and then the Texans win, but that happens. That's what it reminds me of. That is much watch TV. I want to point out the best, worst, or the worst, best game of the week. And it's 6-3 Steelers against the 6-3 Browns. They're both 6-3. 6-3 versus 6-3 in theory, that should be exciting, but I'm just not that excited about it. So we got to pay attention to it because one of these teams is going to 7-3, man. And that is a good record. And the Steelers just continue to get these fortunate situations that allow their record to be better than what they really are. And we're going to have to watch a Steelers beat them up wild card game against like the Jags or something in January. Can't wait for that. But with Deshaun Watson now out, like we talked about before, how will the Browns look now that he's gone for good and they gotta change? This game was really close last time with defensive touchdowns and stuff like that. Can the Steelers do that again? I think the Browns end up winning this game, and I think that the Steelers have to come back down to earth, but whoever wins this game is going to 7-3. And in my opinion, they're not going to be a 7-3 football team. So that is something to watch. The other one that I wanted to point out here is the 4-5 Jets against the 5-5 Bills. Yeah. Again, we talked about the Bills. I love coming full circle. If the Bills drop to 5-6 and lose to the Jets, then things will get ugly. They need to win that game if they have any. I mean, not only are we talking about them like keeping it on track organizationally, dude, but like at some point, are the Bills going to make the playoffs? Same thing with the Bengals. If the Bengals lose to the Ravens and drop to 5-5, like we just said, one of the Steelers and the Browns is going to be 7-3. There are other good teams. I mean, the Eagles, the Chiefs, there are other. The Chargers could absolutely. They're 4-5. I mean, they could make a run and win a couple of games. So I'm just saying, one of the Bengals or one of the Bills is probably not going to make the playoffs this year. And I think losing this week might be the impetus for them to miss.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And they're starting the rookie, Dorian Thompson, what's his last name? Robinson.
Dorian Thompson
out of UCLA, which is a bold move. Yeah, DTR, now that PJ Walker's been serviceable, this is an interesting move during a very pivotal game. Well, yeah, I mean, we can do a whole podcast on that. Right. But with Pittsburgh, the big thing here is the big thing with the Steelers is they're going back to Steelers football. And what I mean by that is the offensive line is vastly improved. And how do I know that? Najee Harris is an actual viable quarterback. Right. So if you have Jalen Warren, I'm big on this. I'm big on a couple things. My truthers of Taylor Heineke and Jared Goff and multiple other ones. Tom Brady, it's Tom Brady until it's not. Same with Patrick Mahomes. And the other one is this is the time of year where we start to pivot and watch gameplay and how game management can translate into different weather patterns. And the Steelers will play defense in any type of weather, and they've got 35 carries, maybe, in the backfield between Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, where Kenny Pickett can truly be the game manager they need him to be and use Deontay Johnson and George Pickens, probably sparingly. You want Kenny Pickett to throw the ball 25 times or less, and you can run the ball, eat clock. You've got a good kicker. You've got a good defense. They can win a lot of games, even with Kenny Pickett at quarterback.
And I have a lot more faith in the Steelers to be a better team going forward than I do the Browns with DTR. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not a big Kenny Pickett guy by any means, but at the end of the day, the Browns just have more consistent weaponry. They have not as good of an offensive line, but I think the defense is right there too. And I just trust the Steelers as a team more than the Cleveland Browns. Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah. And one last thing that you mentioned before we go. You mentioned the Jets and Bills. It's funny how the turntables here. I want the Jets to win as many games as possible so Aaron Rodgers can make the playoffs if he does come back.
Yeah.
Like, this is one where it's like, if they go 4-7, if they lose the next 2 weeks, you ain't bringing them back. There's no reason to. Even Aaron Rodgers doesn't have an ego enough to think that, maybe they'd have to win 6 in a row.
Right.
Like it would have to be incredible. So if they can tread water, like if they beat Buffalo in Buffalo, Aaron Rodgers 100% coming back. And they could 100%. Nobody wants to play that defense with Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson, even if Aaron Rodgers did 70% and he quote unquote tore his Achilles or whatever they want to say to make him look like Superman, even though that's a year injury. And it's
and our next topic, we'll discuss whether Aaron Rodgers lied and whether it's incredibly ironic that the magic of modern medicine is what will get him back from an Achilles tear in the same season. Just kidding. We're not getting into that. We're going to get out of here. And as I tell you guys every week, it's Thursday. Start your weekend early and stay safe out there.